Testing, testing.
We have quorum in the room. So if everybody could take their seats, please, and we'll start the meeting of the Transportation Committee. I just wanted to give you a very quick update on where we are on everybody's favorite subject, which is potholes and spring cleanup. So where we are now is, of course, we're getting spring rain, which means that we're going to get some full culverts in the city and some pooling around catch basins. And this is a normal part of spring, obviously. The city crews are out every day, clearing the culverts and removing what ice and debris is left over from the winter. And if the weather stays the way it is, hopefully that will turn into a much quicker process. If residents do see pooling, however, on the road several hours after rainfall, if they could please contact us through ottawa.ca or by calling 311 so the city crews can get out and address the problem. It's the same system that we're using and have been using for potholes, and that has been a success. In the first 98 days of 2014, city crews have repaired 98,000 potholes. So I want to take this opportunity to, I see some of the city staff responsible for that in the room, Larry and his team, and I want to thank you for the hard work. That's a lot of potholes over that period of time, and I know there's a lot more to go, so thank you very much for the hard work that your team is putting in. Next week we will see the commencement of street sweeping in the city with a concentration on downtown Ottawa, and also the launch of the spring edition of the Tim Hortons Cleaning the Capital. So that's just, as I say, a brief update on where we are on cleaning up the city at this point in time, and we'll now move on to the agenda. We have no regrets received, no declarations of interest. Could we have confirmation of the minutes, please, from March 5th, 2014? Thank you. We have communications as received. And just quickly going through the agenda, if you could indicate whether or not you wish to hold any of these items. First, we have the status update. Transportation Committee inquires and motions for the period ending the 28th of March 2014. Is this report received? Thank you. Next, the Chapman Mills Extension, Longfields Drive to Strandherd Drive, and Bus Rapid Transit, Greenbank Road to Cedarview Road, Environmental Assessment Study, Statement of Work. Thank you. Next, we have the advanced left turn arrow at St. Patrick Street eastbound on Island Lodge Road, which is a councillor's report from Councillor Fleury. I'd like to hold this because I have some questions. And apparently so does Councillor Clark. So that's the full agenda. So we'll then start with Councillor Fleury's report. There isn't a staff presentation, but if staff could come to the table. And I have a couple of questions, and I think, Councillor Clark, you'd like to be on the list?
Yeah, I just wonder why it's even on our agenda, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
I can't get it implemented. I can't get it implemented. Did they agree that it needs it? They don't agree.
So I guess my first question is, this is a councillor's report, but I'm assuming, Mr. Landry, that your staff received the request to go out and analyze this location and determine whether or not the turning arrow was a necessary addition?
That's correct.
And again, I'm assuming that this went through the warrant system?
That's correct. And I'll get Stu Edison, who's program manager for traffic engineering, to just give the committee information on the warrant system.
So maybe, Stuart, what you could start with is tell us what the warrants are for the placement of such a signal and where this particular location landed within the warrant point system.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the warrant system we follow in Ottawa is essentially based on the Ontario Traffic Manual Book 12 guidelines that we apply across the city for any location to be evaluated for the warrants for an advanced left turn phase. It's consistent with municipalities across Ontario, and essentially, as it states in the councillor's report, we generally require a presence of a left turn lane exists, the provision of a left turn phase would not negatively impact the overall operation of the intersection, and that the average left turn volume is at least 2 vehicles per cycle. And then additionally, it's more than 50% of the traffic is not able to complete a turn in one cycle of the lights. So this particular location really did not meet the warrants. We're looking at a total volume in the heaviest hour of 13 vehicles making a left turn. For that reason, it wouldn't even come close to having at least 2 vehicles per cycle making a left turn movement. When field studies indicated all traffic was able to complete a turn within one cycle of lights without any significant delay.
If you had to express it to us in percentages, what percentage of the warrant did your study reveal?
It would have met a level of service A percent warrant. It would be minimal warrants at best, 2 to 3%, I would estimate.
And out of 100%, what do you have to achieve?
I'm sorry?
In order for you guys to say, yes, go ahead and put something in, what percentage do you have to achieve out of 100%?
Well, we would need to achieve the 100. We'd have to meet, like Stu mentioned, especially the last 2 points with regards to the 2 vehicles per cycle, and then also the 50% of those vehicles don't get service. So we do a Q study to determine that type of information. So if that information was, or data collection showed that, then they would meet the warrants.
And so you're saying it met about 3% of the warrant?
Correct.
Yeah.
And have you had other similar requests for the same sort of intervention at different locations in the city?
Yeah, we have.
Okay. And have they been closer to the warrant and also been turned down?
Yes. There's been more, other locations have had more vehicles turning, and they've been turned down.
Okay. And I guess the last question, either one of you or both of you can answer this. I mean, we hire you for your professional expertise, and in your opinion, is the lack of this turning signal at this particular intersection, is that a safety issue?
Historical data, or the last 5 years, has been never a no collision with regards to that movement. From a safety perspective, the vehicles, what we saw in the study, get service when the light's green when they arrive, and we haven't seen any issues with regards to that. So from our perspective, there's no safety concern.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Clark.
As somebody who's been rejected before for the same reasons, not on this particular site, I believe that the warrants are there for a reason. I mean, you're talking here total traffic movement, what's that, 5 and 13 and 13, that's 31 cars over, looks like 8 hours, is that right? That's roughly, 4 cars an hour, 1 every 15 minutes. It's just not a significant amount of traffic. And must admit, the one that I asked for was even worse, 2 cars every 8 hours or something like that. In any event, I just can't support this, because I really think if we don't stick to it, we'll be doing stuff everywhere. Because if you're going to violate the warrants on this, let's say let's not have the warrants, and let's just proceed. Well, they've done the study. The numbers are in here. I think that if that's the case, we can have additional left turn signals in at least 10 locations that I can think of, and probably would get turned down there too. So this one just doesn't vibrate very much.
Does anybody else wish to speak? I'll save you till the end, Councillor Furry, because it's your report, if that's okay. And Councillor Moffat.
Well, I agree with the warrant system. I think there's exceptions that can be made in certain situations. I just look at, we have an intersection in Manatee at the corner of Bridge and Van Vliet, and we added a set of lights to facing the south end, so that the people, it's about 260 homes, could get off the south end of the island easily without having to go into to traffic, because it's quite busy. That intersection would never have met the warrants. There was a finite amount of homes, a finite amount of traffic in that community, yet it was needed for the people that live there. It's a similar situation here. There isn't going to be any more people living in this area, so you'll never be able to meet the warrants. That doesn't mean that the concerns of the people there is any less valid. So I think the warrant system does make sense, but I think there are exceptions to it where there is an inability to meet warrants under any situation whatsoever, and I think you have to look at the situation at hand and take into consideration the reality of what's going on. So I would support the councillor in this situation.
Sorry, Councillor Bullis, I say out of the corner of my eye.
I just want to follow up on the question you had when you indicated how low this was down on the warrant scheme, but how many intersections and requests are there ahead of this? And I'm looking at, and we can all relate to it on a personal level, when we had Bear Brook and St. Joseph, I mean, with thousands and thousands of cars going through that intersection, until it met the warrant system, and even when it met the warrant system, we waited till there was money available. It wasn't like we, you know, and I hate to say this, jumped the queue. I mean, it's very hard to support something when there are so many other intersections that would require this before something. I think you had it down to 2 or 3 cars an hour or whatever. Like, I mean, it's zero on the warrant system, and even if you ever grew that, which you won't, it'll still be zero. So.
Okay, maybe just clarify this. There's a traffic signal already at that intersection. So the one that you were talking about, there was no traffic signal. So we use a different warrant system to determine where traffic signals go. This is a warrant system we're using to determine should a left turn arrow be installed to facilitate the movement. So there are different types of warrants with regards to that perspective. Okay. I don't know if there's intersections way ahead. Basically, we evaluate based on inquiries that come in from the public, from councillors, and we assess it based on this criteria. So it's not like there's a waiting list. It's either, yeah, there's enough cars turning left to justify putting a left turn arrow, or no, there's not. And we don't have a waiting list. Now, that being said, if we have locations that are you know, increasing growth, we'll go back out and evaluate it after 6 months if we know there's a new development that's occurring. So it's just not if we count it once, we're not going to go back out there, but there needs to be some sort of change in the area to have us go back out and do that study.
So, Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Yeah, I was looking at the report that said that no vehicle missed turning left when they got there on the green. So that they may have a bit of a delay, but they're able to get around. Now, they're saying it's not safe. They go around. Maybe they're jumping to go in front of a car. But if they wait near the end of the lights turning yellow, et cetera, at the end, if you're in the intersection, you can still finish your turn. So I don't really see why there would be a need for that. People may feel unsafe. There's lots and lots of places in Ottawa where you can feel unsafe when you're driving. But I agree on the point, this is not one, it has the traffic light. If it didn't have a traffic light at all, that would be a different matter entirely. But since it does have a traffic light, and they're getting around, heck, I've got places in my world where it takes 3 or 4 light turning before you can get through the intersection. So this one is getting on this, or for turning it's even worse. And so I can't see how this should jump the queue when there's, I'm sure, other places which would be way above this for getting left turn arrows in. And if it changes and over time, then that can be evaluated at that time. So I can't support on that basis. Yeah. It's it's just at $10,000. If we only get so many of these done in a year, the ones that need the greatest need obviously should be done, and not in one we've brought forward.
Thank you, Councillor DeRoche. I think you were next in line.
Just a question, Chair. I think Councillor Moffat expressed it well, and I share his views. In my mind, this is a tweak. There's lights that are already there. I fail to understand why there's a cost, though. Can it not be on a flash, an advanced flash, that would you would time it? Like, you know, I commend our traffic branch. You can do a lot with the traffic signals so that they're timed, so that you pinpoint when the problem is, so that if it's not an issue later in the day, then the advance isn't there. So, you know, I guess I see this as a tweak. I'm not sure why there's cost. Why can't there just be a flash? And really, in that case, you're just reprogramming the lights, essentially.
The flashing green that you're referring to is no longer legal in Ontario. We had to remove them as of 2011. They've all been removed within Ottawa.
So the province, they're not legal under the highway traffic now?
It's not legal in the highway traffic anymore. They use the flashing green. The primary issue with that across Canada is different interpretations of flashing green. Some municipalities, there's an indication the light's about to change. If you go to Vancouver, it's quite a different indication than it is in Ontario, for example. So the province of Ontario decided to remove that function from the Highway Traffic Act. So it's not as simple as implementing a flashing green display. There are hardware modifications required. The $10,000 estimate is an estimate depending on the age of the infrastructure and how much physical work we'll have to do. And we don't know that until we get into the duct work and start to actually do the works required.
Okay, fine, I accept that. But wouldn't you just be changing the panel? You'd be putting just a different headset.
Correct.
Hanging.
Correct.
Yeah.
You would change the two traffic signal displays facing the eastbound vehicles, as well as additional wiring required to support those displays, and some modifications to the actual traffic controller unit, and then some vehicle detector sensors within the asphalt to sense the presence of the vehicle to turn left. The accumulating effect is potentially $10,000.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I don't really see it as a queue jumping issue. To me, I see it more as an efficiency of the intersection issue, because if you're telling me it's at 2%, then the number of turns is so low. It sounds to me, to correct me if I'm wrong, that the prevailing traffic is traveling in the opposite direction, and that would be a whole lot higher number. Is that right?
Well, what's happening here is, and what our study showed was that you've got the traffic's arriving, or the vehicles arriving on the left turn, so there's a platoon of vehicles that go through, and then there's a gap that allows the cars to turn left. The challenge with the low number of vehicles here is the way we operate our traffic signals is we put the detector usually two car lengths behind the stop bar, so that it's really the second car that triggers that light to turn left. In this case, if there's usually one vehicle, maybe two at the greatest time, that they would never trigger that left turn arrow.
Right, I understand. So, yeah. But the traffic on Island Lodge Road is much less volume than the traffic on St. Patrick.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So to provide an advanced green warning light effectively would be creating a less efficient intersection, because you're backing up traffic on St. Patrick to allow this movement where you don't need to allow that movement because the cars are getting around the corner through the rotation of the signals anyway. Is that right?
Yeah, that'd be correct, assuming the left turn arrow comes up. If the left turn arrow doesn't come up, then the time we would have given to that phase would have been given to the next one, which would be the through. So at the end of the day, it would, if the arrow comes up, it will impact the capacity of that road because for that cycle, because you have less green time for St. Patrick.
Okay, and without that left turn arrow, the cars are still getting around the corner, but at the end of the cycle as opposed to at the commencement of the cycle, right?
Correct. And although if the car arrived when the light was green, they most likely would have entered the intersection, and then if there was no platoon, when the light turned yellow, they would have the right of way to make their movement when the cars in the opposite direction stopped.
Right. So I don't see what the safety issue is. I know there's a suggestion there's a safety issue. It sounds to me like it's a convenience issue, but it's not a safety issue because they're not sitting out there for several cycles or something. They're sitting there at the end of the rotation. They're getting around the corner, right?
Correct. I think it's more, and Councillor Fleury can talk to that, is more just the feeling that the residents have turning left into the site. They don't feel safe making that movement.
I do it every day on the intersection where I live. It's the very same thing. We don't have the left turn because there's a lot more traffic on Riverside Drive than there is going on to the little street that's serving the community where I live. And so we wait till the end of the cycle to make the left-hand turn into that community. But I don't see it as, I don't know what the safety issue is. I see it, yeah, I'd like to go first, but it works this way. And I can see that if I put that advanced left-hand turn arrow, it would be inconveniencing a lot more traffic on the prevailing function of that road and backing up traffic a lot more than the inconvenience that I'm seeing. So I'd like to hear from the councillor, but I don't see what the issue is. I don't see why this would ever be something we would want to spend money on or advance, because this seems to work fine.
Thank you. Councillor Tierney, please.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you. I know it's got to be difficult, the amount of requests that you get. If it was up to my constituents, they'd have a stop sign on literally every corner. So I completely understand the job you guys do. At the same time, there's some times where I've put requests in and I can count on, well, I can't even count on one hand. There might be one instance where I put a request in and it's always come back, no, 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 no. And you have to fight and prove that there is a concern there. Like on Blair Road in the south end, for me, it was a big issue, and I was happy to find a pedestrian fund to get that money, and the money was the issue in that situation. I guess my question is, how much was spent on just doing this study in the first place? Do you guys assess dollar figures to this?
No, we don't have an exact number on the dollars spent on the study. It's essentially staff time to do field studies to count the data and observe the intersections, record the operations on a cycle-by-cycle basis.
Sure, but surely there's got to be a value to staff if it's their time. So there is always a cost that comes every time we do this. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because 2 years ago we sat at this very table and we voted together at transportation to have $30,000 allocated per ward per year per councillor, and I don't know what happened to that when it evaporated when it got to council. So it's unfortunate we don't have the ability to put in traffic calming measures and do stuff on our own. It's something I'm hoping we'll revisit in 2015 as part of that term of council, because I think that would have been a big benefit right now. Anyway, I look forward to hearing what the councillor has to say and why he figures this is such a big concern, and at that point, maybe we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Very much. That's everybody I have on the list except for Councillor Fleury, of course, who wants to speak to the matter. I won't be supporting the request. I think we have a warrant system for a reason, and I think we have staff with expertise for a reason. But I'll turn the floor over to Councillor Fleury to make his case.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would have loved to put a little more context, and maybe it would have explained a bit more of the situation. So I want to maybe give actual physical context. So you're coming from the market, and you're going through King Edward, through that intersection along St. Patrick, wanting to make a left turn on an island called Island Lodge. There's 2 retirement residents, a city-owned one, and a private one, Rockcliffe Residence. Just to give you quick numbers, so there's around 300 residents in each property. So 600 residents who have daily visitors, family members, and so on. When you look at the warrant system's a good one, but it doesn't, as Councillor Scott Moffat said, it doesn't apply to a situation like this. You'll never grow the amount of residents that live on the island. So unless you have a family that goes and visits their member frequently or increase the frequency, you'll never grow that warrant. I think I have to, and I'm comfortable with an amendment. I want to be clear about what we're looking at. You have an existing left turn channel, and right now when the cycle goes green for drivers along St. Patrick, it allows you at any time, if there's no traffic coming westbound, to make that left turn. All I'm asking is for that to be restricted as a red, and when there is a car in that channel, to activate a left turn arrow. It doesn't need to be at the beginning of the cycle. It could be at the end of the cycle. We want to, because what's happening is that, there's a lot of traffic or a lot of cars coming from McDonald-Cartier Bridge, and people that have turned in this island, they're family members, they're elderly, they might come from the market or elsewhere, do not feel comfortable making that left turn. So to me, it's just a question of timing when we allow that left turn, and I'm sorry, I didn't want to bring it to committee. Obviously, we're stuck in getting a staff response on the warrant. To me, it's not about the warrant. It's about responding to the concerns of when can someone do that left turn. At the end of the cycle there is still a lot of people that burn that red light to get to the McDonald-Cartier Bridge during the PM peak. So my question to you maybe, Phil, is do we have areas in town where you have a left turn channel and you never have an active green left arrow?
You mean just with the green ball? Yeah, we have, most of our intersections are like that.
And the only reason why we'd put an arrow would be because it meets the warrant?
Because there's requirement, because there's, and based on, the conditions, that it's difficult for those vehicles to, they're not able to make that left turn within a cycle. And then the reason we have the criteria in the warrant is because as more and more cycles go through and people don't make the left turn, that's when people start to make not wise decisions, and that's when collisions start to occur. Because if think of it, you're waiting to turn left, you can't get through the first cycle, you're the fourth car, say, then only one car gets through, two cars gets through, you don't get through the next cycle. Well, then all of a sudden you're the third one. You may see a gap in traffic that you think you can actually make the movement, but because you've been waiting for 3, 4, 5 minutes, you're going to try that when in fact there's not that gap there. So that's why that's the rationale behind the numbers, that the 50% that don't get through a cycle and also having two cars. That's the guidelines that have been talked and developed through the Ontario Traffic Manual. With regards to your comment about having the left turn come up at the end of the cycle, the challenge with that is we do have locations where we do that, but the lights are fully protected, which means that you can't turn left other than when an arrow comes up, similar to what you have up at Laurier and Nicholas. Because if both directions have a green ball, so if there was demand, for example, to turn left in one direction, the light would turn amber and red in that direction. A vehicle in the straight would think that it's happening the same thing in the other direction when it's not, and then it would become problematic. So if you made if there was a desire to make that happen at the end, you would need to make that location fully protected, which means that they would only be able to turn left when the arrow came up, so you'd have delays of up to 2 minutes, depending on the cycle length and the time of day, which would be unacceptable, I would think, to those people waiting, when today there's not an issue with regards to them being able to turn left, especially if you think in the opposite direction as well.
Well, I know from a warrant process, we've talked about this, I know it doesn't meet. For us, it's, and in my mind, we can work through when it is in the cycle. It doesn't need to be in advance, because I know the important flow is on St. Patrick, east and west. And I wouldn't expect it, and the residents aren't expecting it to be part of the cycle. It will only be activated if a car is in that left channel. And that's the discussion we've had. Based on that, there's a couple of elements. You're saying it doesn't meet the warrants. I'm saying it'll never meet the warrants, so please consider it. And the other piece is the funding. So in the report, the staff write 10,000, but then we've talked about this. There is construction, there's repaving scheduled for St. Patrick this year, and if timing is worked out appropriately, you felt that the amount could be much lower.
You could coordinate some of the works, but you still need to have our staff put out the detectors in the road. You need them to go out and do the work. So with regards to changing the signal head, and depending on what we find at the intersection, there might need some rewiring and things like that. So, I mean, the 10,000 is sort of, I guess, the high level of what it could cost. It may be lower than that if we were to go out and actually see we don't need to do all the things that we just don't know, because we didn't do a detailed analysis at this point.
Okay. So just as a wrap-up, I mean, I recognize everything and the discussion. I also want to make sure that we're not creating expectations of putting these at every intersection. I think it's a special one in the sense we don't have an island where you have 2 retirement residents elsewhere in the city. It's very specific. It's on a road where there's high volumes of car going east and west along St. Patrick, Vanier Parkway, and that King Edward corridor. And we've received complaints from residents and staff of both properties. So, like committee members to consider that. We're not trying to stop the flow of cars along the St. Patrick corridor. We're just trying to allow that left turn arrow at the end, and at the time of the cycle is not relevant. We can have that conversation. Really, that's not what the request was. It's just allowing a time in the cycle when there is a car in that left turn channel to safely make that turn, even if it means to wait a period of time. That was the request from residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I guess we'll call the vote.
Councillor Blois? Councillor Turnashenko? Councillor Clark? Councillor Deans?
No.
Councillor Fleury?
Oui.
Councillor Moffat?
Yes.
Councillor Tierney?
No.
Councillor Wilkinson?
No.
Councillor Hughley?
No.
Chair?
No.
2 yeas, 7 nays.
So now we move on to a notice of motion for consideration of subsequent meeting, and we have a motion to be introduced by Councillor Clark.
Okay, essentially, we've had multiple complaints about people not getting left turn arrows at Dunbarton and Brittany because of a safety issue. Can't see over the hill, but the warrants weren't met, so I have not considered the action that we just discussed. But I am considering, because of what looks like a successful formula for complete streets on Main Street, that Saint Laurent Boulevard north of Montreal Road, between Hemlock and Montreal Road, it's a substandard 4-lane roadway. In other words, it doesn't have the width to handle 4-lane traffic, especially when people are whizzing up the inside, passing people on the inside all the time. Average speeds, I suppose can you talk about speed they travel or posted speed? The posted speed is, we're finding out, is over 60, 62 on average. And we're, on Hemlock, we're putting in the bike path. We've taken out some parking spots. We put in a traffic light to allow physical crossing by pedestrians and cyclists over at Birch Street. And to extend that down, the community of Manor Park and of Cardinal Glen have suggested that we consider what can be done about having a full-length or full construction sidewalk and a road diet. The road diet is a version of complete streets where you put in the turn lanes, but you only have 2 active traffic lanes running back and forth, which would give us room then to put cyclists on both sides and make the pedestrian feel a little safer on a sidewalk that runs up beside Beechwood Cemetery. So that's my current thing. So instead of 27 whereases, I'll get down to the one that really matters. This is in keeping with concept of complete streets and where the needs of all road users other than simply motorists are being accommodated. $25,000 in funding is required to undertake a feasibility assessment, so we look at this thing, and it would include developing a concept design and a preliminary Class D, whatever that means. Class D is probably the lowest one, for implementing the concept. And Planning and Growth Plan supports getting this information, and since our current council expense policy, I need a council motion to transfer my money into the operation to do this study. So therefore it be resolved that Transportation Committee recommends council approve the use of Ward 13 Constituency Services budget for providing $25,000 in funding for a Saint Laurent Boulevard North road diet feasibility assessment as described.
We're actually introducing it for next meeting. Yep.
No, we can't. I want to debate it.
You want to debate it? Good. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Are there any inquiries?
Yes, there's 2.
Well, you want to?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I have 2 inquiries. One for which we had a conversation at council, but I want to make sure we have an update, that we receive an update on the recent Keeping Ontario's Road Safe Act and the supporting amendments to better understand what it means for us here. So I want to make sure that there is an update at committee on that.
Well,
and the other one is about
if you're coming up
once the construction on a capital project is completed, what mechanisms for review are in place to ensure that the work has been done to the expected standard?
And there was a second inquiry as well?
I just said both.
Okay.
So the first, just to be clear, so the first one, and I'll send it to the clerk, the first one's about the understanding of what are the changes about the keeping our roads safe. It's Keeping Ontario's Roads Safe Act, coming to this committee as a presentation and as a briefing note. And the other one's relating to just capital works and understanding what review we have in place for the completion, once the work is completed, to make sure that the expected standards are implemented.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other inquiries? The clerk just pointed out that when I went through the agenda the first time, I missed information previously distributed. So as noted, received?
Received.
Thank you. Is there any other business? Motion for adjournment? Councillor Hubly? Thank you. And our next meeting is on the 7th of May, 2014. Thank you.